Imagine a child sitting in a classroom. The teacher mentions something about fairness, then behaves in a completely different way.
Read with me.
Most students notice the contradiction, but one student raises their hand and says it out loud. They will say something like,
But you just said we all have to share, and now you're giving that only to some of us.
the room goes quiet, and suddenly, that student is no longer seen as insightful. They are seen as difficult. But why does this happen? If you've ever been the person in the room who noticed something everyone else ignored, you may already understand this experience. Sometimes the person we call disordered is simply the person who noticed the problem first. And in some cases, a diagnosis can reveal more about the system than it does about the individual, because deviation is always measured against a norm, and norms are built on what is common, not what is necessarily healthy. So, when someone processes deeper, feels faster, questions sooner, or refuses to participate in collective denial, the room shifts, discomfort rises, language forms, and labels follow. But here's the question we rarely ask. Are we identifying dysfunction, or are we reacting to difference? Tonight, we're going to examine that line carefully. There's a reason HEYOKA archetypes are often labeled before they are understood. In clinical settings, behavior is categorized by observable deviation from normative baselines. The majority of the population operates through concrete sensing and external structuring functions. The HEYOKA archetype does not. If we look at this through a cognitive function lens, particularly in personality types often associated with this archetype, such as the INFJ, their dominant functioning process is introverted intuition. In simpler terms, this type of mind is constantly connecting patterns beneath the surface of events. Intuition does not process reality linearly. It synthesizes, it compresses patterns across time into singular insights. What takes others months to articulate, the intuitive dominant individual often senses in minutes. Add to that extroverted feeling, which scans emotional atmospheres in real time, and you have a nervous system that is continuously interpreting microsignals, contradictions, suppressed emotions, and unspoken dynamics. To a system built on observable behavior, this looks strange. This considerably rare archetype often interrupts because they anticipate where the lesson is leading before others do. The HEYOKA child challenges authority because they detect internal inconsistency.
Get lost!
They are often the first to notice when behavior and stated values do not align. The adult with this archetype unsettles rooms because they instinctively expose what isn't being said. Clinically, this can be mistaken for oppositional defiance, social anxiety, mood dysregulation, ADHD, or even personality pathology, depending on which behaviors are most visible at the time. But what is often being misread is not dysfunction. It's pattern recognition operating at depth. When a person of this type consistently experiences being labeled too intense, too sensitive, or too much, identity begins to organize around pathology. The diagnosis may offer temporary relief, an explanation, but it can also become a lens through which every emotional response is filtered. Over time, HEYOKA archetypes may internalize the belief that their perception itself is flawed. This creates secondary anxiety, hypervigilance, and sometimes depressive withdrawal. not because they are broken, but because they learned that their wiring is unwelcome. And yet, that same wiring is what allows them to see fractures in systems long before collapse. As children, HEYOKA-wired individuals often show asynchronous development, cognitively advanced in abstraction, emotionally porous, and behaviorally inconsistent. They may struggle in structured educational systems, not because of lack of intelligence, but because of learning style misalignment. Traditional schooling favors sequential processing, repetition, and external structure. The brain of this personality type prefers synthesis, conceptual frameworks, and meaning-based integration. They do not learn best through memorization. They learn best through understanding why. If the why is missing, their motivation collapses. Teachers may interpret this as inattentiveness or defiance. In many cases, formal evaluations follow. ADHD, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, many diagnoses are handed out. When HEYOKA archetypes enter adolescence, this misalignment intensifies. The HEYOKA sees social hierarchies as performative constructs. They detect hypocrisy in authority figures and question narratives others accept without friction. Questioning in rigid systems is rarely rewarded. So they are labeled rebellious, argumentative, disrespectful, and emotionally unstable. By adulthood, two patterns typically emerge. One version suppresses their perception to survive. They become quiet observers, masking their intensity and over-adapting socially through extroverted feeling, while their internal intuitive world remains unshared. The other refuses suppression and is frequently pathologized, called difficult, intimidating, too analytical, too emotional, or too disruptive. Both carry the wound of misunderstanding. The tragedy is that their so-called weaknesses, intensity, sensitivity, relentless questioning, are the same traits that make them system correctors later in life. From a neurobiological standpoint, the HEYOKA archetype often correlates with heightened sensory and emotional reactivity. Research on high sensitivity suggests differences in depth of processing networks. These individuals process stimuli more thoroughly before responding. They notice subtleties others filter out. This produces slower initial responses in some environments, but deeper integration overall. In overstimulating settings, this wiring can appear dysregulated. Their nervous system can move into overload more quickly in certain situations. Emotional responses may appear amplified because they are responding to more data than others consciously register. Clinicians observing surface behavior may identify anxiety spectrum traits, mood instability, or traits associated with personality disorders, especially if trauma history is present. Diagnosis itself is not inherently harmful. It can provide access to resources and language. However, when diagnosis becomes identity, especially during formative years, it can narrow self-concept. This archetype may begin to distrust their intuition, attributing accurate perceptions to symptoms. This is where long-term impact forms. If a child is repeatedly told that their intensity is pathology, they may disconnect from the very intuition that protects them. In adulthood, this can manifest as chronic self-doubt, relational overcompensation, or cycles of burnout. Yet when properly understood, the same nervous system becomes an instrument of precision. They sense tension before it erupts. They detect deception before exposure, and intuit emotional shifts before language forms. What appears unstable from the outside is often hyper-attunement. In other words, what looks like emotional instability may actually be a nervous system processing far more information than the environment realizes. There is also a collective dimension to why this HEYOKA personality type is pathologized. Societies maintain cohesion through shared narratives, and individuals who mirror contradiction threaten that cohesion. This personality type functions as a social disruptor, not through chaos, but through reflection. They say what others sense, but avoid. They ask the question that destabilizes comfort, and they respond emotionally where others suppress, and projection follows. When a group feels exposed, it protects itself by labeling the exposer weird, rude, difficult, unstable. Pathologization can become a form of social control. If the mirror is declared broken, the reflection no longer needs to be examined. This is why many HEYOKA-wired individuals report chronic misunderstanding across contexts: school, family systems, workplaces, and romantic relationships. This misunderstanding isn't random, it's structural. And yet, when mature and integrated, this same individual becomes indispensable in crisis because they are comfortable confronting what others avoid. Every cognitive pattern carries both advantages and vulnerabilities. When understood, the same traits that caused misunderstanding earlier in life become powerful forms of perception. The INFJ HEYOKA strengths include advanced pattern synthesis, emotional attunement, systemic thinking, comfort with paradox, and moral intuition anchored in long-range perception. Their weaknesses, when unintegrated, include overstimulation, rumination, social exhaustion, alienation, and identity diffusion after repeated mislabeling. With learning optimization, they learn best through conceptual frameworks before details, independent synthesis, dialogue rather than lecture, application to real-world systems, and emotional relevance. They struggle with rote memorization without meaning, authority without explanation, environments that suppress questioning, and repetition without integration. And this brings us to the deeper question beneath everything we've explored tonight. And so, the realization emerges. Just because someone unsettles you doesn't mean they're unstable. Just because someone's intense doesn't mean they're disordered. Questioning doesn't necessarily mean someone's oppositional. Just because someone feels deeply doesn't mean they're fragile. Sometimes you're encountering depth without a category for it. Sometimes you're witnessing perception that exceeds your current frame. And sometimes, the person you labeled strange was simply seeing more than you were ready to see. This isn't a romanticization of suffering, nor is it a denial of mental health realities. True disorders exist and deserve care. But misinterpretation also exists, and the INFJ HEYOKA has lived at that intersection for a long time. Not broken, not superior, simply different.